This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's going on, real MVPs? Welcome inside another episode of What's Your Fantasy, episode number 11 here in the NFL. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? This is going to be week 10 in the NFL, and episode number 11 here. Before we dive into everything, make sure you go and check out patreon.com, become a patron, and definitely support this channel. $1 a month can do it. $10 gets you on a podcast, coming on here, talking with Ricky and I about fantasy football or any other of our many podcasts that we have here as well. Also, check out mostvaluablepodcast.com for that MVP t-shirt, and then head over to iTunes and give us that 5-star rating if you think that we are deserving of it. And Ricky, we are going to dive in, as we always do. Ricky Widmer, Brandon Swanson.
What's up?
And Ricky, how did we do this week?
So this one's a little bit of a disclaimer of I forgot to check. And that was just on me. I was worried more about the personal league. I'm in a playoff hunt with you and Sean and Lions guy that I lost personally, but that's in my personal league. That is my problem, not yours. Actually, whoa! No way. You want to hear something funny?
Sure.
We got a battle tonight, my friend. We got a battle tonight, Monday Night Football. We are down 107.6 to 107.5.
Oh.
Andy has Derrick Henry and Brett Maher tonight, the kicker for the Cowboys and a running back for the Titans. And we have Cole Beasley. So it's all going to be settled right here, and we are nearly tied. I'm sorry. 0.1 might as well be a tie. But I am a non-point guy. I don't like the 107.5, 0.6. I like whole numbers. I'm a tie guy, not a point whatever guy.
No, absolutely not. No ties. No ties. Because when you were saying it might as well be tied, no, it might as well not be.
Yeah, might as well
because
be
if
tied.
you can win by 0.1, you win by 0.1.
Might
It's
as well
not
be
tied.
tied.
It's not tied. So I think that
We got 23 out of our defense yesterday.
I think we have. Who'd we have?
Vikings.
Yeah, very good. I think that we have the upper hand here. Derrick Henry, if he's held out of the end zone, I think things look pretty good. Because Derrick Henry has really not been producing the rushing numbers that he would like or that the Tennessee Titans would like, and he hasn't really gotten to the end zone. But one time, I think, all season long, that was against, I almost...
Last week against the Chargers.
Little slip there, almost at San Diego, Los Angeles.
Yeah.
But...
Or last game, I should say.
Brett Maher is good if he gets a number of field goals. That could be bad. But Cole Beasley, if he could get about 8 to 10 catches... That'd be nice.
Hey, remember when I said Amari Cooper could click in game one? Hey, Amari, take the bench. I want to see a Jacksonville game out of Cole Beasley today. 9 receptions, 101 yards, 2 tutties. Give me that, and I'm happy. But you know who finally had a down game for us?
Adam Thielen.
Adam Thielen only got his 12.7.
And he still got a touchdown. Got a touchdown, though.
You know who did worse for us in our starting lineup? A guy that we're going to talk about today because you want to talk running backs. A certain guy in New Orleans that they forget to use.
Mark Ingram.
Yeah. How many carries? He got 9 carries for 33 yards and 1 reception for 3 yards. He got us 2.6 points. On our bench, Calvin Ridley had 19.7. But like I was looking at it and I was thinking, I'm like, neither you or I would have had the confidence to put Calvin Ridley in our flex spot.
Not at this point. Not for this game.
It probably would have been Lamar Miller, and he only got like 6.8. The only other double digit on our team was Terrell Williams, who he was down from his 20-point performances. 10.3 is what he got this past weekend. Got himself another touchdown, this one on the ground.
So, Ricky, let's get into then one of the 2 topics that we want to talk about today. And the first one that we want to talk about is just kind of what you said with Mark Ingram. It's this running back by committee that may have and may still be hurting a number of teams this season. Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara combined for one of the most potent dynamic duos last season. They were unstoppable. You could not stop them. If you slowed one, the other one was there. And most likely, you weren't going to slow either. The only part that you could do to slow them is maybe hold them out of the end zone. Mark Ingram had a great game in his first game back after his 4-game suspension. He was really the only one who played. Kamara had a couple of touches. Ever since that game, which was in standard leagues a 19-point performance and I think 21-point performance or so in PPR leagues, he has been in the reversal role where Mark Ingram is barely getting any carries or catches, and it's been all Alvin Kamara. Now, Alvin Kamara definitely is, I think, the more explosive of the backs and shiftier than Mark Ingram is. But still, Mark Ingram's getting lost in an offense where you shouldn't get lost if you're a guy of that talent.
It depends on what kind of a game you have. Where, first off, it depends on the matchup. Second off, it depends on where we are in the game and what you're doing. If the Saints wouldn't have blown their huge lead, I feel like Mark Ingram would have got more carries because it's like, all right, we're still going to give it to Kamara, but we got to run the ball more than pass the ball. But once, they lost that huge lead that they had. Number two, this was a matchup that maybe going in, we should have seen a lower output from Mark Ingram because the Rams are an up-tempo team. The Saints needed to match that. And how do they match that? Alvin Kamara. That's how they match that. What he's able to do in the passing game mainly. And I feel like those two things kind of attributed to what we saw from Mark Ingram, where it's like, hey, we just lost this lead. Forget about you. We need to get back into this. Let's go with the guy who can help us in the passing game out of the backfield. And Michael Thomas, he was a guy in fantasy that had a huge week this week as well because the Saints were throwing the ball more than running the ball.
Well, the Saints are always going to throw the ball more than they run it.
But
so
like
are
you play the Rams and it's just hit that with steroids and just pump it into them.
But are you saying that basically you need to wait until Drew Brees is gone and they get in a quarterback who's not going to throw the ball as much so they're a little bit more balanced in terms of run pass?
No, not exactly. I feel like after seeing Mark Ingram since he's been back, it just depends on the type of game and the type of matchup. Teams like Washington and Minnesota. Minnesota, they led for most of that game. Washington, they were not able to stop the run. And plus, that was his first game back, so I feel like that attributed to that one as well. Hey, let's give you a couple extra carries to get you into the swing of things, and he just made them pay, especially getting into the end zone twice in that one was a big one. But then it's like the Rams. Like I said, they're an up-tempo team. You're going to have to match that intensity. Like, good thing that New Orleans doesn't play KC in this year because it would be the same thing. Where if you're playing Kansas City, sit Mark Ingram because he's just not going to fit what you're going to want to do with that offense against the Chiefs offense. And then the Baltimore game was another one where it was a close one, 24-23. And unless you feel like the Saints are going to have a big lead in a game, Mark Ingram might not be your best option because out of the 4 games that we have, the 2 close ones, the Ravens and the Rams, he's gotten minimal points. The 43-19 blowout against the Saints, the 30-10 just revenge game against Minnesota where they led big in that game. Those are the only 2 games that we see huge points out of them. So unless you think the Saints are going to blow a team out, maybe you sit Mark Ingram rather than start him.
Well, Mark Ingram, the thing that worries me, and I know I do have Mark Ingram in one of my leagues.
As do I.
And I think that other people would be worried as well. He's not even getting goal line carries, whereas last year Kamara could run all the way in between the 20s, but once they got down there inside the 10, Mark Ingram was in almost every time. He's goal line guy. He's the guy they're going to for the big, tough yards, and they're not doing that anymore. They're keeping it Alvin Kamara.
Well, and that just could be Kamara being Kamara, where it's like last year Kamara was a rookie. Hey, do we want to overload the rookie? Now that Kamara's got a year of experience in the system, he's growing as a player. Maybe we're starting to see, okay, last year we kept it a little 50-50 because one was a rookie and then we had our veteran. Now we're seeing a shift over to Mark Ingram. And I know this isn't a fantasy thing, but it could be next year for Mark Ingram. I'm going to say this. It'll be interesting to see if Mark Ingram is in a Saints jersey when we get to next year, because this is his contract year.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing. It may be one of those things where the Saints don't re-sign him because they see Alvin Kamara being their guy that they can use for everything, passing downs, rushing downs, all those types of things, and that Mark Ingram goes to a team that will use him more often. He may want to be on a team that's going to use him more often because he can be.
Yeah.
He's a guy who can run the ball 20 to 25 times a game, and he can also catch out of the backfield. Now, he's not as dynamic as Alvin Kamara is. He's also older than Alvin Kamara is. So that's not something that you look at and you question and you wonder, well, what's going on there? It's part of it is age, but part of it is he's built for a little bit of a different style there. Now, Ricky, let's look at a couple of other teams here for fantasy, and these are some. I'll just throw a couple out there and say, are you even touching that? Is there someone that you'd rather have? Tennessee, you've got Deion Lewis, you've got Derrick Henry. Are you touching either one of those guys?
Well, to be honest, I'm going to pull up Tennessee because in my head, I thought you were going to go to a different team in that same region of the United States that starts with an A, ends with a T. Atlanta is where I thought you were going to go. But with Deion Lewis and Derrick Henry, I mean, we don't know what they're doing this week because they play tonight. But, I mean, Deion Lewis, this is a guy I drafted, had him on my bench, non-PPR, had about 16 points. I'm like, oh, cool. I'm going to put him in the next game. And he got like 2 points, 4 points in a PPR, 5.3 in a PPR. So, like, with him, it's been very hit and miss where it's like Miami week 1, then Philly week 4, and then that London game. I feel like that London game's an anomaly because of what we saw from that whole thing. Like, that was also a game where Melvin Gordon didn't even play. And I lost because of it, because it was such an early game. And then it's like you got Derrick Henry.
Who'd you lose to?
I lost to you, I think. And then like Derrick Henry, the only time he's had over 6 points, 5.9 points this year is when they played in London. So for right now, and yet again, we don't know what they're going to do this week because obviously we record this on Mondays. But I mean, the Tennessee situation, I'm not super high on, but if I had to play one of them in my flex spot, I guess it's just something I would have to do. But that is not a situation that I would want, having one of them be my top 3 running back on my team.
Ricky, let's look at that Atlanta team now. Let's look at them. You've got Ito Smith and you've got Tevin Coleman. And this one, I feel like, is one of the toughest ones outside of Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram because it's so hit or miss. Tevin Coleman, look at what he did yesterday. 26 points. Absolutely breakout game, explosion game. Ito Smith still scores in it as well. But then there's been a number of games where Ito Smith gets more carries on the ground and gets the touchdown, is the one who comes in at the goal line, and then Tevin Coleman isn't getting many carries and isn't racking up many yards. So this is one of those that kind of goes back and forth. You can't expect this 26-point performance out of Tevin Coleman every time. And then, of course, these are the two healthy ones. You can't forget about the other man that's out there as well, Devonta Freeman. He's just not healthy right now, and he may never be fully healthy. I feel like there's always an ailment with him. When he's fully healthy, he's probably the best one. But seems to never be fully healthy. What do you do if you have one of those Atlanta running backs, or if you don't, who would you rather go for if they're available?
I like Tevin Coleman. And the reason why is I have my phone out because I have to look standard to PPR. It's really like, except for this last week, the last 3 weeks have been a 2-point difference. We're 11-9, then 16-14, and then this last one was about 32-26. the last 3 weeks, out of the 2, it looks like Tevin Coleman is benefiting from this Devonta Freeman injury. And it looks like going forward, although I haven't liked Atlanta at all of recently offensively, it looks like, hey, you know what? This is a team that Tevin Coleman has it going. And if you think Tampa Bay, New York, and Washington were teams that he can feast on, here are some of the next 3 defenses he's going to get. You ready for this? Cleveland, which right now they're in disarray. They are in disarray. He's going to have a good week at Cleveland. Then Dallas. Dallas is also a team that is susceptible to a big time performance from a player. They're not a shutdown defense. New Orleans, they are also a team that is not a shutdown defense, especially on the rushing side. Then I look at it. Baltimore could be a tough one, but then after that, Green Bay, that defense doesn't scare me. Arizona, as you said in your Hugh Jackson video, name a stat category. They're in the last of the league in that stat category. Then Carolina, that's one where it's like, okay, that's a little iffy. And then, I don't know, Tampa Bay, where he had 11 points PPR. So, I mean, the rest of the year, I like Tevin Coleman moving forward because of the matchups he has, plus of what we've seen in this last 3-game sample from him since he took over the majority of the carries.
I think it's been one of those where Tevin Coleman, when he was first kind of taking over for Devonta Freeman this season, it was looking like, okay, he'll be the guy. But then they add in Ito Smith as well, and that makes you wonder, is Atlanta fully in on Tevin Coleman, or do they feel like there needs to be more of a 50-50 split between him and Smith? And that's why I get a little worried. I really don't enjoy having anybody in a running back by committee situation, but the more and more you look at it, the more and more teams do it. The more and more teams are doing it because they don't have the Todd Gurley.
They don't, and that's exactly it.
Or even, I mean, I was going to say, or even Melvin Gordon, but you look at that team, and Austin Eckler gets a lot of touches as well. It's not taking away necessarily good work from Melvin Gordon because he still gets his, but Eckler is putting up, good numbers, so they're going to continue to keep him out there on the field and get him out there on the field as well. So it's becoming more of a running back by committee league because guys like Todd Gurley aren't just being pumped out of the draft every single year, or even Saquon Barkley for this season.
The other thing I was going to hit at is if I am somebody who's like, you know what, I need somebody for my flex spot because everyone else I have, or if you're like a Dave Oster in our league where you're just decimated from injuries left and right. Like Dave got hit with another one today where it's like, well, AJ Green, good news is won't need surgery. Bad news is doesn't know when Dave's getting them back for his fantasy team. So, I mean, if you're in that situation where you're decimated with injuries, Ito Smith is available in about, 70%, just under 70% of leagues. So there's a good chance he's there. However I look at it, he is very hit or miss. And the reason why I say that is, yes, you could have it like if Ito Smith is going to get you double digits, he's got to get double-digit carries. Whereas I look at Tevin Coleman, the last 3 games, they've given him double-digit carries, whereas Ito Smith has had double-digit carries against Tampa and Washington. That New York game, you only see that 6.5, but in that one, like, he is also averaging about 2 receptions a game. However, are you going to see one where it's like the Tampa Bay game, 2 receptions, -1 yards, or the New York game, 2 receptions, almost 30 yards. He was 1 point away from getting an extra point in that one. And I look at it and I go, out of the 2, Tevin Coleman, I would be confident starting him in my flex spot, maybe even as an RB2, depending on how you are. But Ito Smith, I would only take him if you are absolutely desperate for somebody because your team is decimated with injuries.
Another one that I would have looked at, but one of the guys is injured right now, would have been Denver with Phillip Lindsay and Royce Freeman, because that was one that was looking at the beginning of the season and preseason. Royce Freeman, it's going to be his job that he eventually wins from Devontae Booker, and he'll end up being the guy. Then all of a sudden, this Phillip Lindsay comes along in game 1, and we're like, who's that? Who's that? Where'd he come from? It was supposed to be Royce Freeman.
Yeah.
And Philip Lindsay has now been the guy going forward, and now Royce Freeman has been injured and out the last 2 games, where it has given Philip Lindsay a lot of work in the last couple of games, and he was getting a lot of work even before that. So that's something. It doesn't have as much spark in the last couple of weeks with Freeman being out, but that's another one where if you drafted Royce Freeman, if you spent a higher draft pick on Royce Freeman because you thought, okay, I'm going to take a little bit of a flyer because this guy's supposed to be really good. I know he's a rookie, but he's supposed to be really good. Do you drop Freeman? Are you done with him? Or is Denver done with him? Or do you keep him in the hopes that they'll turn to him a little bit more? But it's similar-ish to New Orleans, where Philip Lindsay is your Alvin Kamara, the one who's shifty, more dynamic, and Royce Freeman is your Mark Ingram, who can run really hard and really well, but he's pretty much an up-the-middle type of guy and not, hit the corner and spin, all this nifty footwork and everything. Not taking anything away from him, that's just not necessarily his style. So, let's maybe even take a look here at Denver. I was going to say maybe skip that one, but we can take a look at it.
Yeah, with Denver, I'm not dropping Royce Freeman because, the ankle, from what I'm seeing from DenverBroncos.com, is he this week participated in individual team drills. He just sat out this week. He was questionable coming into the game and just didn't play. So, if I have Royce Freeman, I'm still keeping him. I'm not dropping him. But the thing that's interesting is how long this holds out. If you're that person, like I said, the Ito Smith guy, where you're in dire need of a running back of some sort or a flex spot, or if you're like, hey, I've got this bum on my bench that I need to drop for something, if Royce Freeman is going to be kept out maybe another game, maybe take a flyer on Devonta Booker. I'm not saying start him. I'm saying take a flyer on him, play the matchups, because the thing is, a KC, yet again, high-flying offense that you're going up against, he had 9 carries in this one. So it's like Lindsey got his, but Booker also got his as well, where he had 14 points in PPR for that. Where there was also the Jet game, week 5, where he was used in the receiving game, got himself 10 points. So, really it's going to be Ito Smith and Devonta Booker are kind of in the same grouping of if you're in desperate need of somebody, these guys are available. You can take a flyer on them, but don't expect them to be a double digit. Play the matchup. Play how you think that game is going to go. If you think they're going to go a little bit more pass heavy, you might be good in throwing Booker out there because he has gotten some good receptions in a few of the games this year.
But Lindsey, most likely, in your mind, he's going to be the guy that...
But he's owned also in 90% of leagues. So, there's a good chance that Lindsey is not available in your league.
Now, Ricky, moving to another discussion, moving away from the running backs and moving to the quarterback position.
Okay.
And this is one thing that you were interested to talk about here today, and it deals with one of the players that we saw play last night, one of the quarterbacks we saw last night, and that's Aaron Rodgers. And you made the comment, should you drop Aaron Rodgers? Is it time to drop Aaron Rodgers if you're looking for that elite quarterback who's going to put up the elite numbers each week? Is that Aaron Rodgers?
I just want to clarify, not drop, but sit.
You said drop.
Of course you're not going to
You said drop.
And I didn't mean drop. I meant sit. Where the way I'm looking at it, and maybe this is because we have Aaron Rodgers on our team, where we're used to Aaron Rodgers being top 5, if not top 3, fantasy quarterback. Where it's he's a guy, put him in your starting lineup, unless he has a bye, you're good to go. And maybe it's the injury from week 1. Maybe it's because this year the Green Bay Packers do not have any bit of help for Aaron Rodgers this season. I look at it and I go, yes, he's still top 10 in positional player ranking for fantasy, but is it time to maybe look at a different option on the waiver wire and have a backup that you feel confident in because Aaron Rodgers, like, you're not going to get the 24, 28, and 28 that he got against Detroit, San Fran, and Chicago. You're more likely going to get that guy who's between 14 to about 18 points, which isn't, that's the thing. It isn't terrible, but it's not Aaron Rodgers. It's not what, if many of you drafted Aaron Rodgers, you probably drafted him, if not first round, second round, third round, at least in the first 5 rounds. Usually I'm a guy running back, and then I deal with it. But in most leagues, you're taking that elite quarterback early, and you probably drafted Aaron Rodgers high, and you're probably looking at it and going, I didn't draft this guy in the 3rd round of my fantasy draft to get me 14 and 15 points in a week. So, like, that's where I look at it. Is it time to sit Aaron Rodgers and look for a different option in the fantasy world to start if you're an Aaron Rodgers owner?
On CBSSports.com, for their fantasy, Aaron Rodgers has 3 games where he's been under 20 points. He has 5 games where he's been 20 points or more, and he's been 3 games when he's been 30 points or more. So the 30 points or more, certainly what you want. 30, 32, and 34, those are the weeks that he's had. But then also the 3 weeks of under 20, it's been 16, 17, and 17 that he's had. You're wanting more of, obviously, the 30s, the 28s, like you mentioned. But is that something where, is he a guy who you do sit, though? I mean, it's because that's still not bad. These are his fantasy points through the first 9 weeks. 30, 17, 23, 16, 34, 32, the bye week, 17, and 22. 17 and 22 in his last two games, on the road at the Rams, on the road at the Patriots. 2 very good teams. 2 games where things didn't end up, obviously, the way that they wanted them to. 2 losses. But is he a guy, even with only putting up 17 and 22, is he a quarterback that you can legitimately sit on the bench?
I think so. This year, I am leaning towards this year, yes, because I am going to read you off. This is another player, quarterback this year. I'm just going to read you off the point totals so far this year. I want you to tell me 2 things. Where you think they're ranked positionally in quarterbacks, like what player ranking do they have, and who am I talking about? So here they are. 19.6, 13.1, 16.8, 13.7, 15.8, 12.7, 12.4, 16.4.
Where they're ranked positionally?
Where they're ranked positionally, just throw out a number.
23rd.
Close, 25th. Do you know who it is? I'll give you a hint. He's in the NFC.
I was going to say Matt Stafford, but I'm not sure.
Not Matt Stafford. NFC East.
Alex Smith.
That is what I see, except for the 12s. You're not going to get the 12s from Aaron Rodgers, but everything else of what I just read, except for Detroit, who's bad, the 49ers, who are bad, and the Bears, which game 1, he was A, healthy, B, running off adrenaline, and C, most of his team wasn't decimated by then. You're going to see numbers similar to this. So look at that player rank. Like, the way I'm looking at it is look at that player ranking with an asterisk. The only reason he's top 10 is because of those 3 games where he has over 20 points. The rest of it, you're probably going to get a guy, fantasy-wise, who's closer to an Alex Smith type. And that's why I beg to ask the question of, you're probably sitting there, okay, Ricky, you've told me to sit Aaron Rodgers. Because if you're in a dynasty league, you're not going to get rid of him. You're going to keep him, hope he plays better next year. Here are some guys I'm thinking about. One of them we picked up this week because I anticipated this not anticipated it. I've been anticipating this, but I didn't like Andy Dalton and I wanted a different quarterback. Dak Prescott's one of them. We don't know what he's going to do this week because we're recording this Monday before the game, but his last 2 games, 29.5, 20.2 in fantasy. We're expecting that to be even better because he gets Amari Cooper this year. When they start hooking up
this week.
And the rest of this year too. How is that going to be for Dak Prescott? Another option, and I know people are going to say it's fluky, but Ryan Fitzpatrick. And the reason why I say that is 42.3, 30, 25.1, 19.6, 24. I know Tampa Bay is dysfunctional, but as long as Fitzpatrick's the starter, he's got a chance. He's got a chance to throw you, like, if 90's his floor, that's good for me because right now that's Aaron Rodgers' ceiling. And then the other one that I maybe kind of look at is Andy Dalton, depending on the game, but he's another one where it's kind of like Aaron Rodgers, where it's like, yeah, there's games where Baltimore had 26, Atlanta had 24, this past week had 20, but then like KC had 7, there was a 12 in there, a 17. So it's like, with me, it's you got to pick your battles. I like Dak Prescott. I also really like Fitzpatrick. If you're one of those where it's like, I need a quarterback and Fitzpatrick's available, go and pick up one of those guys and don't feel bad that you have to sit Aaron Rodgers.
And here's the schedule the rest of the way for Rodgers as well. So they've already had their bye. So he's got Miami at home, Seattle and Minnesota on the road, Arizona and Atlanta at home, the Bears and the Jets on the road, Detroit at home. Miami, I think that could be that would be a favorable game.
Depends. I know that Sam Darnold made a ton of mistakes this week, but I mean, if that I know it's Aaron Rodgers, it's not Sam Darnold, but if you get half of the fantasy points from the Dolphins that they had this past week, that's one that could be a tough one. But however, Mitch got points against the Dolphins when they played, so Aaron Rodgers could be a good one for him.
Seattle, they're hit or miss because they can either show up and shut you down or you get some decent points. I mean, this past week, Phillip Rivers had over 200 passing yards and 2 scores. The Minnesota Vikings, I think they can be a tough one. I actually think the Arizona Cardinals, for all the bad things offensively, their defense is probably the best thing about them. That could give Aaron Rodgers some fits. Atlanta, I think that he'll have a pretty good game there. At the Bears defense the first time gave him a lot of trouble in one half of football. If they can keep that consistent for 2 halves of football, it could be difficult for the Green Bay Packers there. The Jets, I think he'll have success. Detroit, I think he'll have success. So
there are games where, like the last 2 for sure, where he could. I think the thing that I'm looking at mostly is Aaron Rodgers is not in that category of like sit him and forget him. But this year he's in the category of where before you could say, well, I've got Aaron Rodgers. I don't have to worry about it. Whereas this year you got to go, who's he playing? All right. I'm not sure about my Minnesota. Might have to look for a quarterback. Whereas in years past, you wouldn't have to worry who he's going up against.
No, that's true. And I think a lot of times, like you mentioned, Ricky, Aaron Rodgers has been a matchup-proof type of quarterback. And that hasn't necessarily been the same this year. How much, though, do you think he's been affected by that knee? Because I think it's been a lot.
I think it's a part of it's the knee. Another big part of it, he's got no help around him.
No, he doesn't.
He's got absolutely no, like, and when he does get help, they just start dropping like flies. Like, this has been the year of how far can Aaron Rodgers carry the Green Bay Packers, and he's carrying them on a bum knee. So, I mean, he's like, this year for Aaron Rodgers in fantasy, it's a lot of, well, you know, he might not have those 400 yards every week. It's going to be more of like, you know, 225, 250 kind of numbers. And he's not going to have the 25-point fantasy. He's going to have closer to the 15, 16 type of fantasy this year.
And, you know, here's the thing to maybe put some thought to is why did the Green Bay Packers not go out and try and get a wide receiver or try and get one of those weapons? Because look at them right now. They
had 2 draft picks to use, too.
They've got Jimmy Graham, who's a huge target but has barely gotten into this offensive scheme this season. Barely. You've got Randall Cobb, who is kind of fallen off. He's been injured, and he's fallen off. You have Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who is now kind of come on the scene. He's done pretty well, but that's not a guy who I think is going to be like your number one receiver. And then you have Devontae Adams, who has been pretty darn solid all season long. He's really carried the wide receiver core for, I feel like, the last couple of years. You got rid of Jordy Nelson, I think, prematurely. The Green Bay Packers just don't seem to have a whole lot of weapons around Aaron Rodgers for him to be able to, one, win games, and two, put up points. For him, from a fantasy perspective, that's where the struggle is. Like you said, there's really no help around him. And there's a lot of these guys who aren't consistently involved from week to week. Randall Cobb isn't consistently involved from week to week. Marquez Valdez-Scantling isn't involved consistently week to week. The only one consistent on that Green Bay Packer wide receiving core is Devontae Adams. The guy that you can play with confidence every week, Devontae Adams, because you know if he's not going to rack up the yards, he's certainly going to have a touchdown.
You know what I find very, very, very funny?
What is that?
Is the two guys that have usually been, for the last few years, they've been the first two quarterbacks off the board for fantasy drafts, Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady. Rodgers is 10th. Do you know where Brady's ranked in positional ranking?
16th?
11th. These guys, you want to hear the 10 names or 9 names above them? Number 9, Drew Brees. Number 8, Deshaun Watson. It gets more obscure from here. Number 7, Mitch Trubisky. Who expected that this year? Not me, except for this week. He fucked me in my personal league. I needed the double-digit points, and he couldn't do that. Jared Goff at 6. Kirk Cousins at 5. Cam Newton at 4. Matt Ryan, still a top 3 in positional points. Like, the lowest he's had is 14 points. Number 2, many people might not like his team, but fantasy quarterback, he's phenomenal, Andrew Luck. And then number 1, the guy who is just lighting it up this year, where his lowest fantasy total was against Denver, 22.9. And that's Patrick Mahomes. Like, who would have thought? Like, I would love to go to individual drafts and look at, like, the names that I just looked off. Go back to your draft and see when they were drafted. What round were they drafted in? That, to me, is probably the most interesting. And I'm going to pull up our draft recap just to see for myself. Because
I think I took Aaron Rodgers as like the first quarterback, first or second quarterback. I think I took him. I mean, he's been Mr. Reliable. He's one of those guys who for so long has been able to put up points and has been the matchup proof guy.
So you ready for it?
Yeah.
I'm going to list off in the MVP league, the What's Your Fantasy Team. These were the orders of quarterbacks and when they were drafted. You ready for this? 4th round with the 43rd pick, Jake took Tom Brady. Then at 49, the first pick of the 5th round, I took Aaron Rodgers. End of the 5th round, Cam Newton. Then Deshaun Watson, 63rd. Andrew Luck, 75th. Kirk Cousins, 77th. Carson Wentz, 83. Russell Wilson, 88. Drew Brees, 99. Matt Ryan, 103. And he is the 3rd top quarterback right now. Jimmy Garoppolo in the 10th round at 113. Matthew Stafford, 122. Phillip Rivers, 124. Darnold at 137. Roethlisberger at 138. Mahomes, 160th pick. Jared Goff, 168. Mitch Trubisky, 164. And then Alex Smith, 172. Derek Carr, 185. Eli, 187. Then I skipped Mariota and Dak Prescott, 154, 156. But the top quarterbacks that were taken, not doing so hot compared to the guys taken after pick 100.
That's always the frustrating part of fantasy football because
you can't put team greatness does not equal fantasy greatness.
Well, it certainly doesn't, and some of these guys who have been the studs for the last couple of years, they're falling off a little bit, and we're starting to see who might be the studs who are upcoming.
The cliff is coming for Tom Brady. Is that it? The cliff is coming. He's at his fantasy cliff, Brandon. He's going to fall off. He's going to fall off that cliff.
I mean, everyone's going to fall off eventually.
That's why
it's called retirement then, too.
I was thinking today, and if you're listening, Sean, I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but in our personal fantasy league, it blows my mind each and every year. When last year Sean did it, this year he did it. Where I get why he does it, because he loves Tom Brady and he wants Tom Brady on his team. And I guess he could say, like, well, it doesn't matter. My team's a top 4 team in our league anyways. But it always blows my mind when Sean, the last 2 years, I'll give you 4 pick swaps if I can get your pick this round to get Tom Brady. Where last year for me, that really helped me out, because if you look at those rounds where I was able to switch, I got some prime players, and I made the playoffs that year. Whereas this year, doesn't matter. Dave was picking those players, so they were bound to get injured anyways. But I mean, it just blows my mind of, like, why trade? Like, why trade for a guy like Tom Brady? I get you like him, but why go for him when he's going to be probably the, like, I know that it's like fool's gold of saying, like, hey, I've got the top 11th quarterback. That's fine. But it's like, why not try to find, instead of going with that guy, why not try to find the guy that's going to be your top 5 fantasy option? The guy that you think is going to do better this year, rather than just saying, well, Tom Brady's the best quarterback. He's the GOAT, so he's got to be the number 1 taken in fantasy.
Name recognition. That's the biggest thing in fantasy football. And sometimes guys will fall into it because name recognition doesn't necessarily add up to points scored by that player or by their at their position. It's the name recognition, and sometimes that's all they have, and they don't put up the points. They don't end up putting up the points that you would think that they would. But Ricky, I wanted to move on from that point, and I wanted to talk about what we do at the end of What's Your Fantasy each and every week, talking about who you like this week, who you are definitely putting in your lineup and playing next week, and then who is it that you did not like, you're sitting them on the bench, you're putting them on the waiver wire. Who is it for you? So
here's number 1, and this is one that this week I went ahead and kind of snatched him off the waiver wire I'm hoping underneath people's noses is what I am hoping. Jack Doyle. He's a guy owned in 40% of leagues. I hit, like, what I did this week in order to pull this off was, so I had Gronk on my team. Gronk's been diddly poo. Like, basically Gronk's jersey this year should just say diddly poo on the back, because that's what he's been fantasy-wise. Not Gronk, I love you, but you just fantasy-wise, I haven't liked you this year. I traded him. The trade I made was I sent Gronk and Tyrell Williams over to Trickle Down Banging, which is Mark Weber's team in our personal league. And then I welcomed into my team Stephon Diggs and David Njoku, which I pulled a very Utah Jazzian move when they traded for Derrick Rose. I immediately, after I got those 2 players, that Saturday cut David Njoku. He is no longer on my team. I cut him like loose change and picked up Jack Doyle. Jack Doyle, to me, if you need a number 1 tight end, pick him up, because it seems like if him and Andrew Luck are going to be both healthy, Luck is going to find him. And Luck's a top 2 quarterback in fantasy. He's going to find Jack Doyle. I'm hoping it pays dividends for me. However, this week, it seemed like my other tight end that I played this week in O.J. Howard had a pretty good week as well with Ryan Fitzpatrick. So really, any of these 2 guys, the guy that I'm low on this week, and I'll ask you if I should feel low, Mitch Trubisky. Like, I don't get what it is with the Bills. I know the Bears won, but, like, still, maybe the Bills just hate me. Like, they beat my Vikings, which spurs me. Then this week they hold Mitch to 7 fantasy points, which I lost 102 to 99. Come on, Mitch. You couldn't have got me 11 points so I could have got the win when you're getting 42 and 21 in your last 4 games. He's one I'm low on, but I'm probably going to start him next week because Kirk Cousins, he didn't do that well this week either. So both my quarterbacks had low weeks.
I think that you can play Mitch Trubisky with confidence next week. We've seen what people can do to the Lions. I know that, like you said, Kirk Cousins didn't have that great of a week
against that Lions team.
But here's the thing: is that he didn't need to. The defense was there. The defense sacked Matt Stafford 10 times. 10 times. The last time that someone sacked someone that much this season was when Baltimore's defense did that to Marcus Mariota. They got to him for 11. I definitely think that you can start Mitch Trubisky this next week. Buffalo's got a good defense. They don't have much else. They have a very good defense. I wasn't necessarily expecting Mitch Trubisky to have a huge game. I was hoping that he'd get a couple of touchdowns, but he didn't need to do much because the defense did it for the Bears, and the running game did it as well for the Bears because they were able to have success on the ground. I like Mitch Trubisky for next week.
Also, I was looking it up. This goes back into our Aaron Rodgers conversation, but I was just curious on this. The order of quarterbacks in our personal league, because I know it's a little different because we do the chaos draft, as Mark calls it, but this was the order they were drafted in. Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Andrew Luck, then Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson, Carson Wentz, Cam Newton, Kirk Cousins, Matthew Stafford, Jimmy Garoppolo, Matt Ryan. So basically those are the starters and then some because of how we do the draft for our personal league for the MVP draft. Yeah. And it was still Mahomes wasn't there. Trubisky's not there. I took Kirk Cousins even though I took... Who did I take earlier in the quarterback round? You took Aaron Rodgers.
I did.
But yeah, I took Kirk Cousins just because, did I expect the Vikings to be great? Yes, but also I expected good things out of Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs. So that was me just playing, what team is he in, overtaking, a Jimmy Garoppolo, because that was also a choice that I had when we were picking quarterbacks.
The guy who I am trying to get off the waiver wire this week and put into the lineup as a flex spot, Duke Johnson. Welcome to the show this year, huh? Because he had not been doing anything in the previous weeks before week 9, that's for sure. But finally, new offensive coordinator, new head coach. Duke Johnson's finally involved. He only gets 1 carry, but he's the leading receiver on the day for Cleveland, has 9 catches, 2 touchdowns. And that was a big week for him. I'd say put Duke Johnson into your lineup, especially in a PPR league. And then some guy who I am not high on this week, I am not high on Matt Stafford. Matt Stafford didn't look last week good this past week against Minnesota. I don't think he's going to look that great this next week against the Chicago Bears. I'm keeping Matt Stafford on the bench.
Yeah, and I mean, Matt Stafford's an interesting one only because, the Lions as a team, you trade away Golden Tate, Marvin Jones Jr. is now your number 1.
Kenny Galladay.
And Kenny Galladay.
And he, over the last, I think I saw the last 11 quarters, he's seen 5 targets.
Yeah, I was thinking fantasy-wise, because if you looked fantasy-wise, Marvin Jones Jr. is the number 1.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing, though, is that he shouldn't be based off of how it's supposed to be in Detroit, is that Kenny Galladay now is supposed, he was supposed to be this stud, and he still can be, but the last couple of weeks certainly have not showed it, as really this Lions offense hasn't been all that great. It hasn't been good for Kerryon Johnson either.
No, exactly. And I mean, that's one where when it comes to fantasy, I've forgotten the Lions are a team. There are a few teams. The Raiders are one of them. The Lions are another one of them. The Cardinals except David Johnson, but even then, I'm glad I don't have David Johnson, so I don't have to deal with the Cardinals. The Jets are another one. There are just certain teams that I just forget their players exist because they're not going to do anything for me in fantasy.
Ricky, I'm going to say one more thing. One guy who I would, I think, get rid of, who I'm really getting pissed off with, is Chris Godwin from Tampa Bay. You never know who's going to get the ball over there. It's after Mike Evans, and sometimes even not even sure if Mike Evans is going to get it. Who's next? Is it Godwin? Is it Deshaun Jackson? Is it Adam Humphries? I'm so sick of Chris Godwin. He's not doing anything. He's not winning me anything. He's certainly not winning me any games. It's been just disaster in one of my big leagues. It's very sad. But do I drop him and go for Christian Kirk?
Yes.
I'm doing it, though.
Yes. Well, because
I'm doing it. Hopefully I get him.
Look at Tampa Bay. And the reason why I say that is O.J. Howard is establishing himself a little better. Deshaun Jackson's obviously going to be the guy. You got Mike Evans there as well. It's just Ryan Fitzpatrick, if he is going to be the starter moving forward, he is locked in on who his guys are going to be that he is going to look to.
Okay, well, this may be it for Chris Godwin's run on my team in one of my big leagues. But Ricky, before we wrap up today, any final thoughts? Anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, Mitch, if you're watching, as a Vikings fan, I still love you. Would love to have you on the show, either the onside kick or What's Your Fantasy. Probably still going to start you this week. Just a little bit of bad blood, you know. I get like this. You screw me. I get it's a fantasy game. I still like you. You're still my top dog over Kirk Cousins, although that pains for me to say because I'm a Vikings fan. Still love you, though.
The Bears-Vikings game flexed to Sunday Night Football in 2 weeks.
As it should be.
As the Bears take on the Lions at Soldier Field this upcoming weekend.
As it should be.
Well, friends, that is going to wrap it up for us today. And before we finish things off, I have to, as Ricky would be mad at me if I did not, have to let you know, check out patreon.com and become a patron. You can support the channel by just giving $1 a month or $10 a month would certainly help us out even more, but it would help you as well. It would help you to come on a podcast, and you can come and talk fantasy football with Ricky and I, or you can go to one of our many other podcasts and talk whatever you would like there. You set kind of the show for what you'd like to talk about, and we will roll right along with it. We enjoy doing that. We have a number of patrons like Matt and Patrick. We love them and all of our patrons, so definitely check out patreon.com. Head to mostvaluablepodcast.com as well while you're checking out patreon.com, and get an MVP t-shirt. Get one of those, and then finally head to iTunes and give us that 5-star rating if you think that we are deserving, and leave a comment as well. We would certainly appreciate it. For Ricky Widmer, I am Brandon Swanson saying so long. Thank you so much for tuning in to week number 11 of What's Your Fantasy. Have a great rest of your week. Have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy week 10 in the NFL. So long.